in today's video, we're going to make this beautiful jewelry wallet. As you may have already seen in my introductory video, which if you haven't, I'm going to put it down in the description or you can see it here. I go in details on everything, all the features and the fun things about this jewelry wallet that you can make. Now, you need to get the pattern instructions. The link is down in the description of this video or on my website at alisocrafty.com. And this is the instruction video. So I have added timestamps down in the description so that you can jump to a specific area of the instructions that you need help with or that you need a little more clarification, but you can literally go along between the written instructions and the video, and I am confident you'll be able to finish this in no time. Let me know down in the comments what you think about it, and I cannot wait to see your final jewelry wallets. Make sure you tag me. Here is my handle, and let's get started. So here we have our exterior main body, the foam for the exterior main body, and the lining. The fabric, the exterior main lining, has woven interfacing, as well as the lining has woven interfacing. Then we have our facing A, which is exterior with woven interfacing. Facing B, which is also known as the pocket facing. Again, exterior fabric with woven interfacing. We have our ring holder facing, exterior fabric, woven interfacing. The ring holder is in the lining or contrasting fabric, woven interfacing, optional. Okay, we have our zipper pocket, which has both the exterior and lining with woven interfacing. And we have our pocket bindings, 2 of those, exterior fabric or lining if you prefer. And this is not woven interfacing, it's just your fabric. And then we have our little strap on the side for the earring card. And this is either lining or exterior fabric. And I added woven interfacing to this one, but I have done it without the woven interfacing. So it's really up to you. The rest of the materials that you will need are a plastic canvas. The measurement is the 10 mesh. You can buy them at any craft store or online. The 10 mesh is the one that the little holes are really tiny. To me, those work the best. If you cannot find the 10, then the 7, it will work as well. I don't think anything bigger than that will work. So 10 is the best. And we're going to cut this to fit the measurement for the earring card. And to cut this, we're going to use an X-Acto knife. You will need a zipper. So just one little zipper and one zipper pull. You will need a magnetic snap. And you will need fashion snaps. And I'm going to use my cam snap to install them. You can use any tool you have, but you will need snaps. And these are the dies, and these are the snaps I'm going to be using. And you will need 4 sets and 1 set of the magnetic snaps. This little piece here of fabric I'm going to use to cut the tabs. You can also use faux leather if you want. If you use faux leather, you can just cut the tabs and leave the edges raw. But I'm going to show you how to make the tabs with a little bit of piece of fabric, and this has woven interfacing. You will need a seam ripper. Even if you don't make mistakes, you still need a seam ripper to cut the fabric where you're going to install the prongs for your magnetic snap. Marking tools. So I have the erasable ink pen and the chalk here. Measuring tool. So I have my little ruler. You can use, any rulers that you use on a regular basis, and of course scissors, a rotary cutter, and you will need a iron. You will also need your wonder clips or any type of clips that you use for quilting or sewing. And you will also use double-sided tape. This is a 1/4 inch double-sided tape, or you could possibly, if you don't have double-sided tape, maybe fabric glue will work, but I definitely prefer double-sided tape. So facing A is this one, and I'm going to fold it wrong sides together in half, just marking the center crease. Then the ring holder. Again, I'm going to fold it in half, wrong sides together. Press it, marking the center crease. Open it again, and you are seeing the wrong side of the facing. Then you're going to take the long edge, one of the long edges, you're going to fold the fabric and align that long edge to the center crease. And you're going to do the same with the other long edge, and you're going to leave it just like that. Then you're going to take the facing B. We're going to do the same thing. And then you're going to fold it again, hiding the raw edges. You're going to fold it again. And this time is a 1/4 inch wide. You're going to do the same with the pocket bindings, just like you did with facing B. These are the pocket bindings, 2 of them. The next thing is the strap and the ring holder. Take your ring holder and fold one short edge 1/2 inch towards the wrong side of it. And then you're going to fold it in half with the right sides together and set it aside. Take the earring card strap, again fold one short edge the same way as you did with the ring holder, 1/2 inch towards the wrong side. But this time you're going to fold the strap the same way that you folded your pocket binding and the facing B. You're going to fold it in 4 different folds. Now we're going to cut our necklace tabs using fabric, the quilting cotton, and we're going to cut the earring cards, and for that we use this canvas. Now we're going to use the measurements that are listed in the written instructions, so make sure you follow that, either whether you're doing it with faux leather or with fabric. We're going to cut 3 pieces, and we're just going to follow the measurements from the pattern, so make sure you pull that right now. Now we're going to do the same thing that we did for the earring strap. Fold one edge in by 1/2 inch, that will be your seam, and then you're going to fold it 4 different times until it is a 1/4 inch wide. Now I trim off some of the bulky fabric here because we're going to place a snap on each end, and I don't want it to be so bulky that I have an issue with my snap, so that's just an extra tip. Follow this for all 3 tabs and set aside. For the vinyl, I have this frosted clear vinyl. You can really use any vinyl you want. I wouldn't suggest a thick vinyl, like a 16 gauge is probably too much, but a 12 gauge is good. So we're gonna cut this, and I have a video here that I show you tips on how to cut vinyl. And we have our mesh, the number 10. And that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to cut the mesh. I tried to find a corner that had a good edge, that didn't have any scratchy raw edges. So I picked this corner and I did a rough measurement, with my permanent marker and then with my regular scissors and just cut, okay? So now we're going to use the X-Acto knife to make the other two sides perfect and they don't feel scratchy. But on this side, because I cut it on this corner, is smooth. You're going to use your X-Acto knife and you're going to carefully, and I'm just going to zoom in here so that you can see how I'm doing this. Now, I have to be very careful. I want to cut the leftover squares here. I'm going to cut right down the little center in between the two little squares, that little line down the center, okay? And for this, you just have to run it twice, just go once, twice, and it will be okay. See how it's coming out? And it feels smooth. It doesn't have raw edges anymore. But you can also use scissors. And if you have good scissors, maybe that tiny little scissors that you can just cut right there down the center. Very sharp scissors though. See how easy that is? I mean, it's just, and it's smooth. It's smooth. It's not going to catch on your fabric. I made a mistake here. So now I have to cut another row. And I'm doing this with you so that you can see not only my mistakes, but so that you don't feel frustrated if it doesn't work the first time. And also to explain to you why you have to, when you first cut it, it has to be bigger. Because if you make a mistake, you have room to cut some more if you have to. I'm going really slow. And now I'm going to do the side. So you can use your scissors or the X-Acto knife. Now the key here is for this not to be too big that it won't fit in your pocket. So if after you make it, you realize, oh, it's still kind of big, then, you can trim it some more wherever necessary. But if not, it's fine, as long as it fits in your pocket, it should be okay. The other part of this earring card is to cut a little rectangle in one of the corners. Pick whatever corners you want, because that's where we're going to attach the little strap so that this is attached to your jewelry wallet and it doesn't fall off and you lose it. And so, but for this one, we definitely need to use the X-Acto knife, at least for to kind of cut right here the center. And I'm going to measure 1/2 inch up from the bottom, so right here, and about 1/4 inch in, and that's where I'm gonna cut my first kind of line. And so if I do this, then I move it over and I'm gonna do 5/8 of an inch, and then I kind of have an opening there, okay? And so because I don't want it too close to the edge, so at least I'm gonna start cutting it at least 1/4 inch in from the outer side. And so here it is. And you can draw it. I mean, you can draw also if you want, to make it easier. But you can do a little drawing line here to kind of give you an idea of where you're going to go. So after you cut it, the first slit right here with your X-Acto knife, then you can take your regular scissors and squeeze it in there and cut the rest. And again, you don't want any raw edges here because it will eventually damage your fabric. So I'm going to use this. So now I have an opening here of approximately 3/4 of an inch by 3/8 of an inch. So now your earring card is ready. You can put it aside. Next, we're going to make the strap, the ring holder, and the tabs. And so what we're going to do simply is join them together. They're already folded, so we're just going to stitch them. For the strap, for the earring card strap, as you can see, we have it folded. We folded one of the short edges, and then we're going to stitch it all around, okay? All 4 sides, closing the strip of fabric together. And we're going to do the same with the tabs. For the ring holder, we have to turn it right side out. So we're going to stitch it with the wrong sides facing you, right sides together. And here's the folded edge. You can use any of the turning tools that you have, but I don't have any. I always use a piece of yarn. And I just cut a little piece of yarn that I have here left over. And I am going to stitch it on one side here of my ring holder strip of fabric. I'm just going to stitch it there, and then I'm going to close it, and I am going to stitch a seam allowance of 1/4 inch along the side here, and then turn it right side out. So let's go ahead and do that now with all of these pieces. Always start stitching on the open side. Next, we're going to insert the foam into the ring holder tube. To do that, there's several tools you can use. The most common one or cheapest one is using a safety pin. You can do that. You can also use this tool. It's called Clip and Glide Button. You open it here so it releases the pressure, and then you can just put the foam there, and then once you close it, it is pretty tight. It's not going to let go. And I like it because it has this pointy end here as well. So if I need to insert and kind of move some fabric around inside the tube, that pointy edge allows me to do that. So we're going to insert the foam into the tube, and I like to insert it first through the folded opening, not through the raw edges. So just go ahead and insert it, and start moving your fabric around. And you want to make sure also your seam is down the center of your piece of foam here. So you're going to insert it like that until you get to a point where your foam is actually bigger than the tube. And you don't want to leave foam in this 1/2 inch square here. And if you want, you can use a marking pen that is not very noticeable, but just enough for you to know when to stop. And that's what you're going to do. So keep going a little more. Be careful because you don't want to go too far back, you know, towards the center, because then you'll have to reinsert the foam. But you want it to be right below that. And the only reason for that is because we're going to insert a snap here. And I don't want this area to be so thick with the foam and all the fabric that I'm having a hard time inserting the snap. And now I can let go of it. And I know I cut a lot of foam. I just want to have all that extra, just in case I have to reinsert it. I want to make sure that, you know, I have enough fabric or material to work with. So this is where we're going to take it down to the sewing machine, and you're just going to stitch it about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance here. And you're going to stitch a square on that 1/2 inch mark. Now let's place the snaps on the fabric tabs. And for this I have the 3 tabs, and we're going to measure 5/8 of an inch down from the raw edge, and that's where you're going to place the stud side of your fashion snaps. Then you're going to measure 1/2 inch up from the folded edge, the one with the seam. And that's where you're going to install the cap and socket side of the fashion snap. Go ahead and do that for all 3 of the tabs. And for the earring card strap, you can stitch this in place, but I am going to do something a little bit different this time. I am going to add a rivet here that is just going to add a nice little touch, but this is completely optional. You can also just stitch a little square in place, but I'm going to place it right here in the center. The distance is approximately 1 inch folded up. So just find the center if you decide to do that, and place the marking and add your rivet. You're also going to add fashion snaps to the ring holder and the ring holder facing. And for this, you're going to install the male side of the fashion snap to the facing and the female side to the ring holder, making sure the cap is on the outside, and just follow the instructions for the right measurements on where to place the fashion snaps. On the written instructions, you'll find that information. The other snaps for the tabs should look like this. When you see it, you have your stud here and your socket. So that way it closes like that, and you will have 3 of those. And this, of course, is completely optional. I added a rivet here, but if you don't want to do that, you can just stitch a little square and reinforce it, and that will help keep the strap in place. Next, we're making the zipper pocket, and for that you will get your zipper and the lining and exterior pieces of fabric. We're only putting the fabric on one side of the zipper, so you want to make sure that your zipper pull is pointing towards the left, right? Because you open it from left to right. So that means that our bottom part of the zipper is the section that is going to have the fabric. So we are going to, looking at the zipper with the right side facing you, you're going to take the exterior fabric and you're going to flip it down so you will see the wrong side of the exterior fabric, and you're going to place it along the bottom tape here of your zipper. And the zipper is pretty long, bigger than the pocket, so really it doesn't really matter like where you place it, as long as you have your zipper pull in between the fabric here. And just take some pins and pin it in place. You can now put the lining piece and then stitch it all together. So as you can see, my exterior fabric is facing me, the right side. The zipper is now the wrong side facing me, and both right sides together. I'm going to take my lining with the right side facing down against the wrong side of the zipper, and I am going to sandwich the zipper together in between the exterior and the lining. And then just holding it together, you're going to add extra pins here to keep it in. You can also take this to the sewing machine and like top stitch like a stopper here on top of the zipper teeth to prevent the zipper pull from coming in and out. And so now take it to the sewing machine. You're going to stitch it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, 3.5 millimeter stitch length. You can use your 1/4 inch foot for this, or you can use a zipper foot. So once that's done, we're going to flip it and join the exterior and the lining together, wrong sides together. And you're going to top stitch it here at 1/8 inch seam allowance, 4 millimeter stitch length all along the top here part of your zipper. Make sure you pull your fabric so that you don't have any extra fabric here on the top zipper. You really want to make sure it's all stretched out as much as possible, and that both the lining and the front match. Okay, it's the length here, that everything is even. You can iron here, you can press it with a hot iron if it's easier for you, and you can also put some pins here on the side and on the bottom to make sure that when you are stitching it together that your fabric doesn't move around, and then you end up having like extra fabric here bubbled up, and then it doesn't match at the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and top stitch it now. You can also baste stitch it at the bottom here. The step here to baste stitch it at the bottom is optional but very helpful, especially when it's time to put the jewelry roll or wallet together. Okay, now we're gonna make the pocket. So we're gonna make the clear pocket first. You're gonna pick the longer one that you have, and you're just gonna follow the measurements that are in the pattern as to the distance to make the gussets. So and you want to make sure your gussets are, so if this is the front of your pocket, your clear pocket, that the gusset right here to your right is facing that way, and the one to your left is facing to the left. So on the left hand side, I have 3 markings, and I take the marking closer to the center, and I'm going to match that to the first marking here to the left, leaving the center marking kind of in the middle there folded. And don't worry, I used a permanent marker for this, and it's okay because my fabric is going to cover it with a pocket binding. And you do that for the top and the bottom. So that's one side, and then the other. And you have your final measurement that you want it to be. So you want it to be the width of your main panel. So make sure the measurements are correct when you're done. Now, as you can see, I have pins. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm just going to stitch over the folded sections here so that it can stay in place. So next, you're going to take both of your pieces of clear vinyl and your pocket bindings, and you're going to add them to one side of the clear vinyl. So in this case, I picked this side and I put my pocket binding here. Just make sure that your vinyl, it's all the way touching the fold here of your pocket binding. And go ahead and take it to the sewing machine, and you're going to stitch it on the bottom and the top at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 4mm stitch length. You're gonna do that with both of your clear pockets. Now let's add our magnetic snaps. You're going to use an erasable marking pen, and you're going to mark the bottom and the top of your exterior panel here. So here's my exterior panel, my fabric, and here's the foam side of it. And before you mark the bottom or top, make sure that if you have some sort of directional fabric or a fabric with a specific design and you want a specific look when your jewelry wallet is closed, that you test it now. So what you would do is that you will fold it about 3 times and see how it will look. If you like the look now, this will be your top and this will be your bottom, okay? But say you don't like that, and oh no, I like this better. Like I like how it looks this way better. So find the direction that you like, and the flap will be the top, and then this will be the bottom. So in my case, it doesn't matter because my fabric looks the same no matter what. So I take my erasable pen and I marked a T and I marked a B, okay, for top and bottom. Then from the bottom, you're going to measure the distance where we're going to place the magnetic snaps. I like to do all of that on the foam side because that way I don't run the risk of doing any markings on the exterior. And even though this is an erasable marker, I just prefer, if I have the option to do it on the inside, that's what I would do. Before we place the marking, you need to make sure that you have both sides of your magnetic snaps and the washers. You will need your seam ripper at this point. You will also need small scissors. Optional, but very, very useful, fray check. And as well, optional, but very useful, some duct tape. And you'll see why in just a moment. And of course your ruler. So we're going to follow the measurements from the pattern. And so from the bottom up and down the center, you're going to mark a point there. I place my dot there. Okay. I'm going to take one of my washers and I'm just going to place it right there at that center point. And then I'm going to draw the two little lines on the side. And now I have my markings right there. Now, you're going to take your seam ripper and very, very carefully, you're going to just rip the foam. Eventually, we want to do both layers, right? All layers. But right now, let's just do the foam on both sides, on both lines. Perfect. And then once you have the foam cut, you're going to carefully get your scissors in there and try to cut the fabric. Maybe cut the fabric some more. So now we're going to take the socket side or female side of your magnetic snap and you're going to place it on the exterior. But before you do that, just add a couple of drops of fray check where you cut the fabric. It's always a good idea to do that. And then install your snap. There, perfect. Add your washer, okay? And then you're gonna fold them with your fingers like that, okay? Look center, that's important. Okay, and then I am going to take a little piece of duct tape and cover my prongs. And this step is optional, but it's very useful because you don't want the prongs. You see how they're metal and they could like open up and rip your fabric, and we don't want that. So the duct tape will help with that. And I think I'm going to put another piece on top of it. Some people also put a piece of interfacing here and fuse it. And that also helps. And we're going to do the same with the other side of your magnetic snap. We're going to place it on your facing A, the one that is folded in half only. Find the measurements from the pattern instructions. And the folded side, this is important, the folded side will be the bottom and the open side will be the top. This little piece of duct tape doesn't need to be that big because this space here is very narrow. Okay, at this point, you can put this aside for now because what we're going to do is join our exterior main panel to our lining main panel. So with the wrong sides together, we're going to join them. Now, you can baste stitch this together using your sewing machine at 4mm stitch length. You can hand stitch it, baste it real quick, or you can use basting adhesive. Either method is okay. We just want to make sure that our exterior and lining are joined together at this point. Here it is, both sides together. You now follow the pattern instructions for the measurements that we're going to place on the lining side of your jewelry wallet. Now, this is very important that you follow exactly the measurements as they are listed in the written instructions. And for this, you can use your chalk or an erasable marking pen and your 6 by 24 or 6 by 12 ruler. One thing that you need to make sure that you also know where is your bottom and where is your top. So for example, remember where my magnetic snap is, that is my bottom. So I am going to put a little B here and a little T. So now that you know where your bottom and your top are, go ahead and place the markings. I have my markings here, my top, my bottom. What we're going to do next is start taking all of the pieces that we made, okay? And we're going to start placing them on top of our lining here. And I like to start with the ring facing. And of course, make sure that when you're looking at it, this is your top and you're looking at, you know, this is, you're looking at it right in front of you, that you place your snap in the direction that you want to open it. So if you want to open your snap from left to right, like this, then you make sure you put your snap to the left. But if you want to open your snaps from right to left, because you're left-handed, it's okay. You can do it that way. So at this point, just place it in any direction that you prefer. Kind of place it in between the two lines. And what you can do is just take a couple of pins and just pin it in place and take it to the sewing machine and just stitch it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance on the top and bottom of the ring facing. Now let's add the facing A, the one with the magnetic snap, and you're going to place it along the very top edge of your main body here, and you're going to align the side that is raw and that you can open up along the top edge here of your main body in the lining. And this is the folded side. The folded side is facing the ring holder, and you're going to align it to the top and to the sides, and just place a couple of wonder clips to keep it in place. Take it to the sewing machine. You're going to stitch it along the bottom edge of the facing A using a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 3.5 millimeter stitch length. For this step, you can also use a zipper foot, because if your foot is the wider one, you may hit the magnetic snap. So if you want to prevent that, you can switch to a zipper foot and stitch the facing in place. The next step includes adding the necklace or bracelets tabs. For that, we are going to start with the gusset pocket. So as you can see, we have made the gusset pocket and we added the top binding only, and now we're going to add the bottom binding. And we're going to open the binding here and place the pocket inside. When you take it to the sewing machine, you're only going to stitch it along the top edge of the binding. Okay? Not the bottom. Only the top edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. 4 millimeter stitch length, because this is vinyl. To place the tabs on your jewelry wallet, you're going to find the markings that are kind of like in the center of the body here, the main body of your jewelry wallet. And you will see that after you do the markings, you'll see that there's a 1/4 inch difference in between one marking and the other. And then you also will have 3 markings, and they're an exact distance. So that's where you're going to place your tabs. So the first thing we're going to do is take some double-sided tape, and we're going to place the double-sided tape in between that those two lines for the 1/4 inch markings there. Okay, now you're going to take one of your tabs, and one of these little lines is where you're going to place the tab, and that line is going to go down the center of your tab, and you're going to place the top edge, the raw edge, on your tab where the stud is, along the top line of that marking. Then take the other one, and you're going to do the same. Now you're going to take this to the sewing machine, and very carefully, using your zipper foot, you're going to stitch on top of each tab. The next step includes adding the gusset pocket to cover the raw edges here for your tabs. So I just want to say something real quick. When you're stitching the tabs, the foot may get a little sticky because of the double-sided tape. Just kind of like, don't stress about it, just kind of work at it a little bit, just push your fabric a little bit, not too much, because all we're really trying to do is baste stitching. I just like to do that because when I start putting my pocket now, I don't want to be worried about my tabs moving out of place. So let's place the gusset pocket on the main body of the jewelry wallet. So a couple of things you need to be aware of. The gussets should be facing you. This is the front of your pocket. So as you can see, the gussets are here, and they can open on if I do that. So that is the right way. Second, the bottom part of your binding, the one that is not stitched, is what's going to go over the raw edges of your tabs. If you remember earlier, we stitched the top binding on both sides of the binding, top and bottom, and then the bottom binding only along the top, and that's because we're going to stitch it now along the bottom. So just pay attention to those little details. You're going to place that bottom binding along the bottom marking of that 1/4 inch distance, just enough to cover the raw edges of your tabs and not so close that it touches your snaps. You want to make sure that you have enough room when you stitch it, that the foot is not going to hit the fashion snaps, and make sure that your sides match as well. And at this point, I'm just going to take a wonder clip and place it along the bindings so that my pocket stays in place. Go ahead and take it to the sewing machine, and you're going to stitch it along the bottom part of your binding at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 4mm stitch length. And then you're going to take it and you're going to stitch it along the sides here of the top binding of the pocket so that we can keep the pocket in place. Now let's add the other 2 pockets. We're going to add the clear pocket and the zipper pocket. For this step, make sure that you close the tabs. You want to get them out of the way, you're going to take your clear pocket, and you still have two lines here, two of your last markings, the ones that are from the bottom up, and you have one line that's above the other, and the distance of these two lines is 1/4 inch. Take your clear pocket, you're going to place the bottom of the clear pocket along the bottom line here. Okay, just like that. Make sure the edges on the side align, and just take a couple of wonder clips and just clip them in place like this. Then you're going to take your double-sided tape, and you're going to place a little piece of that over your clear pocket, and this is going to be right in between those two markings, those two lines. Okay, so now I have my double-sided tape here. I'm going to take my zipper pocket and place the top side of my zipper tape along the top line, and so it's going to cover the double-sided tape like that. And just make sure, of course, the sides align. So you're covering the raw edge of your clear pocket with the zipper tape. The sides will match. Now the bottom here, you're going to have extra fabric, and we're going to trim that off at the end, towards the end. Don't worry about that right now, but you will have between 1/8 of an inch and or 1/4 inch distance left over. It's not much, but I want you to know so that you are not worried thinking that you didn't align it correctly or you cut it too big or whatever. Now take this to your sewing machine, and you're going to stitch it along the zipper tape using your zipper foot. You're going to stitch it a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the top of your zipper tape, and then you're going to also stitch it as close as you can to your zipper teeth, about a 1/8 of an inch from the zipper teeth here on the same side of the zipper tape. Okay, this is important that you stitch both lines. Now we're going to stitch our ring holder in place and our earring card, and this is pretty simple. We're going to snap the ring holder, okay, and you just want to make sure it's centered along the ring holder facing, and you're going to take it to the sewing machine, and you're going to stitch it right there over the original stitching where the foam is. You're going to stitch it in place. And for the earring card, you're going to, depending on which side you inserted the strap, you're going to either stitch the strap to the left or to the right of your jewelry wallet. So place your earring card inside the pocket, and at this point you can decide, you can see, well, if I put it here, for example, and I take it out, will it be easy? Okay, I can work like this, or I can just place it on this other side, okay, like this. Would it be better this way? It's up to you. I'm going to stitch it right here on the left, right below my ring holder facing. Okay, so I'm just going to stitch it right there, 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and the same here. The next step here is to add the binding to our jewelry wallet. But as you can see, there's still a lot of fabric kind of sticking out of the edges. So we're going to trim all those off and have the wallet ready for the binding. So we're going to flip it with the exterior facing us. And for this process, you really just need some scissors. We're just going to take the scissors and kind of trim off any excess fabric or zipper tape or anything that is sticking out. Okay, because we want the edges to be flushed. And here at the corner, this is the top, this is the facing A, and so I have my round edge here, but then I have my piece of fabric here that is pointy. We're just going to carefully trim around that, okay, and make it even for both sides. Okay, and here it's the bottom of the wallet, and so I have my zipper pocket. I want to make sure that my zipper pocket is flat, completely flat, so the sides look okay. It's just the top here I'm going to trim off, and again, really carefully with my scissors, I'm just going to go around, and I'm using the exterior of my jewelry wallet as the template to cut my zipper pocket. Let's put this aside for now and let's make the binding. And for that, we're going to make bias tape. And bias tape is simply cutting the strips of fabric at a 45-degree angle, because that allows the fabric to stretch easily in comparison to when you're cutting it on the grain. So for that, you need a square piece of fabric. So this one is 14 inches by 14 inches. You can cut it smaller than this, bigger than this, depending on how much bias tape you need. But for this project, a 14 by 14 square of quilting cotton is more than enough. This fabric is not interfaced. You can use a quilting ruler that they usually come with the measurements here, that it has the 45-degree mark, and when you do that, you place your that line along one of the sides of your square, and that will give you the 45-degree angle. That is exactly what you need to cut from there to there. So here I have my fabric. This is like the bottom of my square, and this is my 45-degree angle line. I place that line right along the edge, matching the beginning and end of my square. Then I take my rotary cutter and I'm just going to cut across. And now I have two triangles, and one of them, look, you can really stretch this fabric. So after having our two triangles, you're going to join them right sides together. So the way I do it to make it easy for me and not get confused is that I have my two triangles. This is my top triangle, my bottom triangle. I'm going to join the right side of my top triangle to the left side of my bottom triangle. So I take the right side and I flip it right sides together over the left side of my bottom triangle. Now you want to make sure that you match the corners as much as you can, but you will have a little bit of fabric left over. So they call it dog ears or cat ears, I don't know, just a little triangle there. And so you have this look right now. We're going to use wonder clips or pins, whatever you have to keep the fabric in place. And now we're going to take it to the sewing machine, and you're going to stitch it along the top here at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. The next step is to fold the fabric in a way to get it ready to cut the binding. Before we do anything, I need to open the seam here that I just stitched together. And so you're going to open your fabric, your 2 triangles. You're going to open your seam and press it. I like using starch for this process a lot when I'm making bias binding or any binding, because it just helps the fabric keep the shape, and it makes it so much easier when we're stitching it and putting the final piece together. So now we're going to open up the seam. Now let's fold this, and we're going to make a square again, but a smaller square. So you have your seam right here down the center, and you're going to take one of the pointy edges and you're going to align it along that seam, like right down the center where the stitching is. And as you can see here, my pointy edge is going to reach all the way to the beginning here of my seam. You can put a pin in here if you want to keep your fabric in place, if it makes it easier. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take the other pointy edge and take it across, align it along the seam line that we just stitched together on the other side. And now we have a nice little square. So what we're going to do now is press this. And I'm going to press it so that it's really nice and flat. Doing this process will really help me have those crisp edges that I want to have when I have my final bias binding. So making sure that you cut now your strips of fabric with the seam on a 45-degree angle again. Don't cut it along the fold. Okay, you're going to cut it along the opening here where the 2 pieces of fabric join. So the best way for me to know is that my seam is at a 45-degree angle again. So I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to cut 2-inch strips along this square. Here are all my strips of fabric. It's only 4 pieces, not a lot. Now we're going to join them along that bias cut. So take your two strips of fabric, no matter which ones, and you're going to join them right sides together like that. Okay, so you will have a little bit of your leftover fabric. It's going to be about a 1/4 inch that you are going to have left over. One thing that you can do, if you notice when I cut it along my edge, when I joined the 2 main triangles, I had some leftover fabric. I can just trim that off to make it easier, make it smoother when I join my strips of fabric. And they're going to be like this. Okay, so one is going to go from left to right and the other one is going to go from right to left. So you're going to join 1, 2, 3 sides together because you want to have 2 loose ends. Take it to the sewing machine and stitch it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, 3.5 millimeter stitch length. Now we're going to open the seams that we just stitched together and cut off the little extra fabric. Before I do that, like I said, I like to use my starch. So I'm just gonna starch the whole thing at this point because I'm going to need it. So, okay. perfect. And what I'm going to do now simply is fold it in half, my bias binding. Just fold it in half and iron it together with the wrong sides together. Just like that. And I'm just going to press them together. Quick little tip before we add the binding is that you can baste stitch the facing A and the zipper pocket together. That way when you add the binding, these pieces of fabric are not moving and then you run the risk of not catching it. So just take it to the sewing machine and baste stitch it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 4mm stitch length. That's good. So now we have our wallet here. We're going to flip it with the right side facing you. What I recommend you do is to leave about 6 inches of like a piece of binding that you're not going to stitch together right away. So yeah, this is about 7 inches actually, which is good. So leave that much binding, like a little piece hanging in there. And what you're going to do is that you're going to take your wonder clips and you're going to start aligning the edge of your binding along the edge of your jewelry wallet, right sides together. And this is important that the folded side of your binding is facing the inside or towards the center of your jewelry wallet. You want to make sure that you are aligning the raw edges together. Believe me, I've done that before and it's not fun. When you get here to the corners, you can, because it's a bias tape binding, it will stretch, so you can pull it a little bit so that it stretches and it goes along the curve. And use as many clips, wonder clips, as you need to in this process, okay? So if you need to use wonder clips on every inch of this binding, then you do that. And I'm going to stop right here, kind of like at the beginning of my gusset pocket. That's where I'm going to start and stop adding my binding. And I'm going to do the same at kind of like at the beginning of the other clear pocket. That's going to be where I start and stop the beginning, adding my binding. So I can start at the beginning of the clear pocket, go around and end at the top of the gusset pocket. And again, I am going to leave about 7 inches of the binding as well. So I'm just going to cut it here. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch it at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along the edges here, okay, with the wrong side or the lining, the interior, facing down. You're going to stitch it all around, beginning and started at the beginning here where I marked it with the 2 wonder clips. After you add the binding, there could be a little bit of extra room here around the corners if your stitching is not exactly at 1/4 of an inch. So what you can do is, if you're binding, when you're closing and turning your binding, you notice that you don't have enough room here, what you can do is trim off some of that corner edge here to give it room, to help the binding move and fold over. You see, just a little bit, not too much that you'll lose the shape of your jewelry wallet, but enough for the binding to cover the stitching. You see, do that as necessary. The next step is to close your binding. I take my jewelry wallet and I place it flat against the table. I take my binding, so the space that is not stitched, and I place it flat against my piece here, my jewelry wallet, and I do the same on this end, and it's about an inch distance. I just find a good middle point where I join both pieces of binding, where they're like together like that, okay? And then what I'm going to do, place a marking right there, and then I flip it to the other side and I place a marking right there, maybe not with that, just a little marking. That is going to be my stitch line. That is where I'm going to stitch my seam. After that, I am going to cut it half an inch past that line. Okay, so I measure here half an inch, and that's where I have my finger, and that's where I'm going to cut. And then I do the same on the other side. So this is the other one. I overlap and I have half an inch. I measure half an inch right there. And I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to cut right there. Okay. So now I am going to open my binding and fold this, because at this point it's too short, so it's not going to, give in, and find the right sides together. Okay, just like that. Make sure it's not twisted. Make sure that you find your, that you open your binding and the right sides are together. And I take it to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch half an inch seam allowance. And here we have our binding, and it's joined together. At this point you can either trim it off or not, but you definitely want to open the seam and fold it in half and take it back to the sewing machine and stitch it in place in the area here that is missing the stitching. So now we're going to fold our binding towards the front, or I'm sorry, actually towards the lining, and you're just going to go around your entire jewelry wallet, folding the binding, making sure it covers the stitch line. So all that stitching, you want to cover that. And just pull your fabric over, or in this case, for example, you see how much fabric I have here? That's too much. So that's creating bulk. So in this case, I'm just going to trim some of that off, and that will help the binding fold over easily. This area right here is a little bulky as well, so I'm just gonna trim some of that off. Not fully, because I have the foam in there, but there's a lot of layers here that you want to, try to reduce some of the bulkiness if you can. So that's what I'm going to do here, especially around the binding area. Okay. Start the stitching on the longer side of the jewelry wallet, and with the lining facing up, and stitch it exactly at the edge of the binding, which is about a little bit under a 1/4 inch seam allowance, maybe 3/16. That way you will catch the stitching at the back as well.